Hello my wonderful friends, my name is Katie, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk all about my favorite books from 2024. I tried really hard to narrow down this list, but it was almost impossible. In 2024, I read probably the most 4- and 5-star books that I've read ever. I think this is really because I've been narrowing down what books and what authors really work for me, and honestly, I'm not mad about it. It is such a good problem to have. That does mean I have quite a few books to share with you, and I do have a section for honorable mentions as well, like books that I still think are great and worth your time, but maybe aren't books that I'm going to think about every single day. The first book we're going to talk about is actually a two-parter. Let me explain. So I did reread Out on a Limb by Bonam-Young. I love this book. I reread it every single year. It is so good. It stands the test of times. I know what you're thinking. Isn't there a surprise pregnancy in there? There is. It's not my favorite. I know it's not typically everyone else's favorite either, but this is done so well. It's so good. It's so worth your time. I dare you, I challenge you not to fall in love with Win and Bow. So I know what you're thinking, why did I start off my favorite books of 2024 with a book that I reread often, with a book that didn't even come out in 2024? Valid questions. It is because it is connected to one of my other favorites of 2024, and that is Out of the Woods by the same author. In this book, we are following side characters from Out on a Limb. So Out on a Limb, we're following Win and Bow, who are heavily in Out of the Woods. However, we are following Sarah and Caleb, who we meet in this book. They are the main feature of Out of the Woods. In this book, Sarah and Caleb are kind of going through a marriage in crisis. They have been together since high school. Everything's kind of been smooth sailing for the most part. However, Sarah's going through an identity crisis. She is just feeling lost outside of being a wife. She's not really sure who she is, who she wants to be. She just knows that she wants to kind of stand up on her own 2 feet. She doesn't really want everyone to take care of her. She wants to be able to take care of herself. In this story, we get to go through such an emotional journey. It is told through dual timelines, so we do get to go back in the past, see how her and Caleb met, and kind of how they got to where they are now, especially with her losing her mother throughout that time. It is a definite emotionally hard-hitting story. There was a few times I found myself tearing up, but I just love this author. I love the way she tells a story. It is always just something that I connect very deeply with, and so these are 2 books that I know I'm going to reread every single year. Then we're going to talk about Last Call at the Local. This is the first book I've read by this author, and ironically, it is a 3rd book in a series. I know. I was sent this because I am a Berkeley influencer, and so it was sent to me early last year. I think it was in January for 2024. It was like the 3rd book I read of the year, and I knew immediately that I absolutely loved this. In this book, we are following, I think her name is Rain or Rainy. I don't know. I read this with my eyes, not my ears. She is a singer-songwriter, and she's kind of like out there living the dream, going from place to place, bouncing around, and she finds herself in Ireland, and there she meets Jack, and I love this duo. In this book, Rainy is so hard on herself, like so incredibly hard, and she's very easy to relate to as well. But what I love so much is that Jack has such a soft heart. They are such opposites in that regard. She's so hard on herself, but Jack is so loving and compassionate and considerate, and there was this moment in this book when he was saying like, oh gosh, what was it? It was something like, you're not too much for me, or something like that, right? Like saying like, you might think you're too much for other people, but you're not too much for me. Like he just wants a chance to love her. Stop. But also keep going. And he also is a cat dad. I don't know if you can see the cute little cat. Wait for it. Right there. You see it? Oh, I love it. The cat also is a great character in this story as well. I just genuinely had a really good time with this one. I definitely want to go back and revisit this whole series. I want to read book 1 and book 2 and then eventually get to this one as well and see if that changes my experience reading it. But again, definitely recommend this one. Next is a book that will surprise absolutely no one. If you were on my channel at any point in 2024, I talked about this book a lot. I've convinced a few people to read it. Rightfully so. I genuinely think it is the best book by this author to date. Funny Story by Emily Henry. I know you're probably sick of people talking about this book, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I really love this one. I really enjoyed these characters. I thought the story was quirky and fun and different, and truly these characters were flawed and damaged but real, and I had a great time navigating their story, but navigating them also as individuals. I really love the dynamic that they were polar opposites, but they were kind of like forced into the situation to like work with each other, and I thought it worked out really well. I really liked their chemistry. I do know that Emily Henry has another book coming out in 2025, so we'll have to see how it compares compares when that one comes out, but so far, this is the top book for me. Then we have Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams, which technically comes out in 2025, very soon. However, I read this in 2024, and it would be a crime for me not to mention it here because I had such a good time with it. I loved these characters so much. In this book, we're following Emily and Jackson, and they have always kind of been rivals. They just have not gotten along. And they're both teachers and they work in the same school system. Emily thought she was finally rid of Jackson. He was running off and getting married, and she thought she would never see him again. However, Jackson is back in town, the wedding has been called off, and she wants to know what the heck is up with that. Then throw in a little bit of shenanigans as well, and there's also the fact that they're both secretly authors. It's crazy. It's a crazy time. But what really sold this book to me, why I loved it so much, is honestly Jackson. I don't know what to say other than he is a top tier book boyfriend. I loved every second of him. There was this moment where Emily was freaking out in the book and she was just kind of like overwhelmed, and he was literally like, tell me what's wrong, how do I fix it? They weren't even dating. They were nothing to each other, maybe acquaintances, and he was just like, I will do anything to help you. Okay. And then also he rides a motorcycle in this book, which, if you know, is kind of a weakness of mine lately. I don't know what it is. I've been really into men who have motorcycles. I'm a fan. But all in all, this book was really funny, really sweet. I loved the family. If you've read the When in Rome series, you will see familiar faces, and I just had a great time. Next up, we have to talk about Bourbon and Lies by Victoria Wilder. What a great romantic suspense. Like, immediately when I picked this one up, I picked it up because of the cover. I mean, it is stunning. It is absolutely stunning. But right away when you dive into this story, it is hard hitting. It knocks you like off your feet. You're like, oh, okay, anything can happen in these books, anything. And unfortunately, the men in this series, the Fox men, they are kind of known in their town to be cursed. Any woman who gets involved with them, usually it does not end well for them, which honestly is really unfortunate because these men are so interesting and complex, and I love them. I have read the second book in this series as well, Bourbon and Secrets. They are both available and both on KU, at least here in the US. And I highly recommend them. If you are into romantic suspense, or even if you're curious in getting into romantic suspense, these are quick and good reads. You will have a fun time, but always check triggers just in case. Then we have Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage, which is the third book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. And I wasn't sure about this one. I really wasn't. I liked Done and Dusted. I did not love Swift and Saddled, but this one, I mean, I should have known. It's a single dad, and honestly, Gus does not disappoint, and Teddy was such a good counterpart to him. This really gave me, like, the feeling of Heartless vibes by Elsie Silver. I had a really good time with it. Their banter was super playful, super fun, but there's also, like, some really interesting friendship topics in this story as well. Teddy is trying to navigate her life now that kind of everyone in her life is going in different directions, and she's feeling a little lost and a little stuck and a little behind, which I think is super relatable to many of us right now in our lives. These two, I love their dynamic, and what I also really loved in this story is the healthy communication between Gus and his ex. I do not like other women or other male drama, so like an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend coming into the picture and just creating unnecessary drama. I don't love that. It's not for me. And in this book, Gus and his ex, they do such a good job co-parenting and just like cheering each other on, and I love that. So hands down, if you're not interested in this series, that's fair. I would argue read this book. So all the books we've talked about so far have been books that I just loved. They either made me swoon or laugh out loud. They were all feel good, good time books. Now we're going to talk about The Women by Kristin Hannah, which honestly emotionally destroyed and devastated me. I read this with a group of my friends on BookTube. I was in pain. I was distraught. I don't even know how to put into words the feelings that you get when you read this book, because you knew it wasn't going to necessarily be happy because it was taking place during a war and it was following women in war. But I didn't expect to be hurt in quite such a brutal way. I feel bad for my husband and everyone who had to listen to me talk about this book because I was incoherent. I probably was making zero sense whatsoever, but I felt so bad for Frankie, who is the main character in this story, because I don't know what Frankie did, but Kristin just did not stop piling things on top of her. Like, anytime you thought something seemed hopeful, no, there's no hope. This book taught me there is no hope. And all I can really say is, in order to get over the sadness of a Kristin Hannah book, you almost have to just wait until Kristin Hannah releases the next book for her to devastate you again, and you forget about the other one for a little bit until somebody brings it up in conversation, and then you remember. That's how I feel about Kristin Hannah. But here's the thing. I don't regret reading it though. It's a book that I feel like I will always think about, and it's a book that, like, I'll never truly forget, if that makes sense. Then we're gonna talk about Summer Romance, which was a book that absolutely surprised me. I decided to give this author another chance because my friend had heavily encouraged me that like I would like it. And so I did, and I'm so glad I did because this book was so good. It definitely falls more into like women's fiction or literary fiction, I would say, because we're essentially following this character as she navigates her life after her divorce and after losing her mother. And so there's a lot of grief and like conversations about like identity and self-discovery. However, her relationship with Ethan, amazing. I loved Ethan, and Ethan had to do his own growth journey as well. But again, I am such a sucker for supportive men. When I read contemporary romance, I want a man who is either really grumpy and has a soft spot for the female main character, or who is just like the most cinnamon roll supportive guy you've ever met. I just love it. I don't know what it is. Because then when I read fantasy, I want the men to be morally gray, grumpy, standoffish, you know, like slower to warm. But in romance, I love he falls first. And Ethan would do absolutely anything for her, and I just loved it. You guys knew this book was going to be on this list, right? We knew, right? I feel like I was kind of like the unpopular opinion because Wild Love was not my favorite. It was definitely good. I loved a lot of the cameos, and I still had a good time with the story, but like it wasn't a book that I wanted to scream about, if that makes sense. This book though, it delivered for me, which is kind of actually strange because in this book, we are following the female main character who is a singer-songwriter, and I really usually don't love that. I really usually try to stay away from stories with that. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I just don't love it. I wish I could pinpoint what it is that doesn't vibe with me about that, but this one I didn't mind it. And I did realize I'm gonna have to reread this because I didn't realize that the audio actually has singing in it. So I want to experience that. So that's gonna have to happen. And I believe it's narrated by Teddy Hamilton, which is already an immediate yes. Like, what was I doing? What I will say about this book is everybody kind of already knows that for me, Elsie Silver's books starts with Heartless. It starts with Daddy Cade. Wes is a very, very close second. So now my new order is Cade, Wes, Theo. How will that change with the next book coming out in this series? Great question. I'm very nervous because I definitely think I'm going to have the best time with the next book coming out in March. It is being narrated by Samantha Brentmore and Jason Clark, who happen to be like one of my favorite like narrator duos of all time. So the pressure is high. It's very high. Next, we're going to talk about Delicate Escape, which is another romantic suspense. This one is by Catherine Cowles, and I have been really, really enjoying this series. I think this is the Sparrow Falls series, and this is book 2. We are following Thea and Shep, and I loved their emotional journey. This was definitely a slow burn. Thea has severe trust issues based on the traumatic events that she went through in her previous relationship. Definitely check triggers. I would say that I don't necessarily think that this book is dark by any means, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't be potentially triggering to you. So just take care of yourself. But I definitely think this is my favorite book in the series. There are 3 books out right now in this current series, and this one hands down is one that I would pick up time and time again. The love story between these 2 characters, I really, really enjoyed the patience, the care, and the compassion they have for each other. And I'm already sad that I don't get another book where they are like the sole couple, because I want a whole series of just them. I'd be so happy for that. Next, we're going to talk about a book that I'm not quite sure how to explain it to you without spoilers. So bear with me. We're going to talk about That's Not My Name. And this is a YA thriller, and it was such a good time. I definitely thought that I was so smart. I was like, oh my gosh, I know how this is gonna end. I know the twist from a million miles away. I didn't. I want to challenge you to pick up this book and see if you can guess the twist as well. If you have read this book, please no spoilers in the comments below. Let people have a good time. Let them kind of go through this journey on their own. But what I'm going to tell you about this book is we are following a female main character who wakes up but does not remember who she is. She does not know her name. She does not know how she got where she is. But she is with a man who claims to be her father, and she has no reason not to believe him. However, he's definitely acting suspicious. So do with that information what you will. On the flip side, we're following Drew, where his girlfriend has gone missing and the whole town thinks that he's responsible for her disappearance. Either he killed her or he is keeping her somewhere, right? So he is trying to not only clear his name, but also just find his girlfriend that nobody seems to be looking for anymore. The author has another book coming out in January. I don't think it's a continuation, but it is another YA thriller. I've heard mixed things, but I'm really, really hopeful that it's gonna live up to the hype. Quicksilver. We had to talk about Quicksilver. It had to be on this list. It had to be. I loved this book. It is a little chunky, but it does not feel chunky when you're reading it. I definitely recommend the audio if you can purchase it. It adds just a layer of depth and enjoyment and entertainment, in my opinion. The narrators do a great job, and it really helps in terms of like the Quicksilver parts as well. But the whole cast and crew in this book, I just care very deeply about them. I feel like they all have such quirky personalities. They have such banter and such chemistry that just works really well together. The two main love interests, yeah, I love them. I'm obsessed with them. They are my whole personality. Kingfisher, I would fold like a lawn chair. It wouldn't even be a hesitation. No. He is grumpy, misunderstood, brooding. I love it. I love every second of it. And then there is a trope in this book that happens to be one of my favorites. I can't tell you what it is, but it's here. It's here. And then some of the moments at the end of this book were so creepy. So I was listening way too late at night. My imagination, but I had a great time. It was a wild journey, and I need book 2 immediately. Next, we're going to move into the honorable mention section of this video, and we're going to talk about just a couple books. We're going to start with Love Unwritten by Lauren Asher. The Lakefront Billionaire series honestly has my whole heart. I think it's my favorite Lauren Asher series to date. The third book I know is coming out, and I have really, really high hopes, but I loved this one the most because, of course, we're following a single dad and nanny romance, which I always just have a sweet spot in my heart for. However, I just did not love the writer, like the singer-songwriter aspect of this story. I wish that would have been kind of removed. I get that it was a big part of her identity and who she is. However, it just wasn't my favorite. It just didn't work for me because I feel like it added so much of why this book was so big, and this book didn't need to be this big. Next, we're going to talk about Bonded by Thorns, which honestly I think everybody was talking about in 2024. This is a why choose fantasy romance. This is also inspired by Beauty and the Beast, and I had a great time with it. I've read book 1 and I've read book 2, and I'm very eagerly hoping here in January to read book 3 and 4. I loved it. I loved it. I loved all of the characters. I felt like they had such interesting dynamics with each other, and it was just a fun page turner, if I'm being completely honest. I'm very intrigued by the plot, which usually is not something I can say with books like this. I feel like usually you're in it for the spice and the romance, but I also want to know what the heck is going on behind the scenes as well. So I love that. And the last 2 books we're going to talk about are actually part of a series, and that is The Avalon Tower and Veil of Dreams. I binged these so fast. I read both of them in a day. Not both of them like 1-2 in a day, but like I read Veil of Dreams in one day, Avalon Tower in one day. And they're good. I mean, they're fun books. If you're looking to like hit a reading goal, or if you're looking for a book to just get through quickly, these are going to deliver. You're not going to want to put them down. I genuinely was like, excuse me, tell me more, tell me more. And when you read book 1, I thought I knew where I wanted things to go. I thought I had a solid idea. And then I read book 2 and I was like, oh no. Oh no, like what? You don't know what you want to happen. I mean, I know what I want to happen. That's not the direction these books are gonna go. So along with the female main character, she has a decision to make. I feel like I have a decision to make. Will the author and I choose the same decision? I don't know. But like, this is a series where it might not be the most in-depth series. The world building might not make the most sense, but it's very character driven to me. Like, I wanna know where these characters end up. I wanna know the conclusion. That's what I love the most about this story. So do with that information what you will, but genuinely all of these books, all of them that I have mentioned, truly were books that I had a great time with, that I definitely recommend you give a chance. Those are the books that I loved this year. I cannot complain. I had a really, really good time. I probably could have yapped to you about like 30 more books, but I figured, you know, you have things to do. I have things to do. Editing Katie does not want to do that, so we're gonna stop here. I think it's a good list. I would love to know, if you are still here, what was a top book that you had in 2024? Did we have any in common? And if you're not feeling chatty, which is totally okay, leave me your favorite color heart emoji. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!